Okay, thank you very much, Sibel, and first of all, thank you for inviting me to the panel today. I think, and State of Green, the organization I represent, is in the sweet spot between the public sector and the private sector. We have arm's length to both, and our job is to tell the story, provide the narrative about Denmark. Where did we come from back in the 70s when Denmark was totally dependent on fossil fuels to where we are today, and what kind of visions do we have, and why is it that we think that we have some experiences that we can share. I mean, we're a country of only 5.8 million people. We only account for 0.1% of total global CO2 emissions. So you could ask, it doesn't really make any difference what we do in Denmark, but it has done over the years. And I would say that looking back 50 years to the first oil crisis in 1973, that really was the starting point for Denmark's green transition. As I said, we were totally dependent on imported oil. And like the rest of the world, we were very severely hit when the first oil crisis hit the world. The Danish politicians and parliament decided that, first of all, to put a high tax on all carbon, and secondly, also to start incentivizing renewable energy. And that set things in motion. We have had a constant focus on energy efficiency and on renewable energy. And you could say the position Denmark has today when it comes to wind power, for instance, as a global leader, was definitely born at that time when we started from the political side, from government side, to subsidize the wind industry. No more subsidies are needed today, but we have reached a point now where we have decreased our CO2 emissions significantly. We have a goal of reducing by 70% by 2030. We have picked the low-hanging fruits. Now it becomes really difficult, so it's important to do it in as cost-efficient a way as possible. But we have created tens of thousands of jobs in the green sector, and at the same time, we have also seen a number of Danish companies who actually were born out of the first oil crisis and who are global players today in the renewable energy. So basically, I think we have an excellent story, and the current situation, it has dawned upon everybody, I think, that the war in Ukraine and that security policy is energy policy also. So that has also added momentum to the push in Denmark for even more emphasis on the green transition. And I would say if you look at discussions in Denmark, public discussions today in Denmark, you'll see that it's business and industry that is pioneering the transition. They think the politicians are too slow. I was in Egypt 2 weeks ago for the UN Climate Conference COP27. We had brought 30 Danish companies with us, had a pavilion for them where they hosted side events, etc. And the unilateral message was to everybody at the side events, don't put up new goals. Let's start and see some action on the existing goals. The solutions are there. We need to move faster. Then you asked for one concrete example for this transition, and the best I can give right now is on the west coast of Denmark, or of Jutland, there's actually Denmark's 5th biggest city called Esbjerg, which back until the 1960s was one of Europe's biggest fishing ports. A fleet, not only a Danish fleet came there, but international fishermen also loaded their fish there. Now, that more or less died, and instead it was turned into Esbjerg, the city of Esbjerg was turned into an offshore hub for offshore wind. They needed a lot of people to work, people who were used to working at sea under harsh conditions, so fishermen were retrained and became oil workers. And when that sort of gradually faded out, because we made a decision in Denmark not to exploit oil and gas any longer, it turned into and has now turned into a hub for the global wind industry. The Port of Esbjerg is today the biggest exporter of wind turbines and blades to places all over the world. And again, it has created tens of thousands of jobs, not only directly at the port, but also in neighboring communities, because they could see that obviously the big wind producers themselves needed to be there, but there was also a need for subcontractors. So that, I think, is a pretty good example of this transition over the decades to a situation where you create new green jobs. And there is a huge ambition in Denmark now to build 2 artificial energy islands, one in the North Sea, where there will be a production of 10 gigawatt of wind power, and possibly also power to X connected to it. So again, that will only add new jobs to the area. So basically, to round off, I think the perception in Denmark is among business and industry, and particularly among Denmark's biggest industry confederation, that you have to go into a more sustainable direction and create green jobs. Thank you. Somehow I knew I would be the odd man out here on this. We don't really have that much to be proud of, I think, in Denmark when it comes to gender equality. At least not in the workplace. We have had, before I took on this job in 2008, I had spent 15 years working in the media as a business editor and a business journalist. And I've written many stories and many editorials about the need for more women on boards and on top management. But we are still in a situation in Denmark today where we discuss, is it necessary to have legislation to make up for the deficit? Because there is a clear deficit of women in top management in Danish companies, not only the listed companies, the stock exchange listed companies, but also in ordinary companies. And when it comes to the board, it's the same. There is a deficit of women. And my personal opinion is we will have legislation at some point, because it is simply not progressing enough at the right speed. So there will be some kind of legislation coming in over the next 4 or 5 years, unless we suddenly see a dramatic change. And I must admit, from my own organization, my board, I have 12 people on my board, only 1 woman. At this point, there will be another one after New Year, but still, I think it also reflects the situation in the government administration in Denmark. We are gradually seeing women becoming state secretaries, but it's a shift that is very recent. On the other hand, in the organization within State of Green, we have 15 employees, and 10 of them are women. So, and simply because they were the best 10 out of 15. So we still have a long way to go, and I think you mentioned it earlier, Cecilia, about talent attraction in the future. I can hear it. All of my employees are between 27, 28, and well, for the women, late 30s. But I can hear from them, if they are going to work somewhere else, it will have to be a company or an organization which has a purpose. Young people are purpose-driven today, not only women but also men, and that will also reflect on the talent attraction in the future, and hopefully also to the benefit of women. When we had, not the last election, but the previous election, national election, general election in Denmark in 2019, it was called a climate election. And because just before the election, opinion polls showed that people, the election issue they cared most about was the climate. And it turned out that the women were the ones that were most concerned about the climate. And we can also see from various reports that when it comes to individual action in order to improve the climate, women are by far the first movers, not the men. So we have a long way to go, but I think it will improve in the future. But when it comes to legislation, I think we'll have to follow Norway.
Thank you, Finn. Now I want to open it for questions.
Yeah, I can only echo what Cecilia and Nina said about export credit facilities same from Denmark. Actually, I think earlier today there were 2 people from the Danish Export Credit Agency present here talking to some big entrepreneurs in Turkey about projects. I think the Danish export credit system also makes it possible to invest for equity. So it's not just a guarantee. And you only have to have, I think the limit is, you have to buy 30% Danish. The rest can be from anywhere else. So there are a number of facilities. And when it comes to ODA countries, it's the same, a lot of different schemes. I would also add that we do have a number of pension funds in Denmark that are very, very active on a global scale on sustainable projects. Not only wind, but also solar. Some of them are billion-dollar enterprises today, and they go wherever they see an opportunity. I can put you through to some of them if you want to. Thank you.